What time was dinner at your house? Dinner at my house was at 5 o'clock. Every day, Monday through Friday. All three Bizzotti girls at the kitchen island with mom on the left, middle child, middle seat. And I always had the best view of the front door. So I could see when the door handle would jingle and the keys would turn and dad would be home. Sometimes dad got to eat with us, and other times he'd only catch the tail end of it. Keys in hand, suit still on, dropping his wallet by the front door, and he would at least get a choir of the Bizzotti girls saying, "Welcome home, good evening," or "Hey daddy." I didn't realize how special these dinners were. I learned as I got older that a lot of my friends never had dinner with their families, or they came from different households or different family dynamics than mine. But Monday through Friday, 5 o'clock, it was always dinner at the Bizzotti house. I lost my dad last January after a 2-year battle with pancreatic cancer. I also lost him during the time of COVID. And in that 2-year battle, I lived largely in Chicago with my husband. So I wasn't around for as many of those family dinners as I liked. And I honestly missed his last Thanksgiving. There's a picture with my 2 sisters, my mom and my dad, and I am a paper plate with a squiggle drawn on it to make it feel like I was there. So now when I go home, that dining room, that kitchen table, I sit at that middle seat and look at the front door sometimes. And I wait for him to come through to join me for one last meal. I have to remind myself he's not coming. This month's theme is folklore. And I'm sure I'm not the only one in the room who, when you think of folklore, take it to somewhere ancient, a tradition that can feel old and powerful. But for me now, folklore is much more about preserving memories and traditions that I'm fighting to keep alive. Because in a way, I'm fighting to keep my father's memory alive. And I should explain, I am half Persian. My dad was from Iran and came to America when he was 18 and built a whole life here. I wasn't raised with my father's language. I can barely read or write, probably the reading level of a first grader. But I remember his food. And when I miss him, I long for those comfort foods. Maybe someone else's comfort food is mac and cheese. Mine is pita bread and feta cheese. Or I look for kebabs and kefir or tahdig, which is the crispy rice at the bottom of the pot. Anything that could make me feel close to him. And when I tell people I love nonfiction, I think people think I love to read textbooks, but I promise you I don't. I love to read this part of nonfiction called food writing. And food writing is just like it sounds like. It is essays and stories from food writers, from food critics, from people who travel the world, journalists, chefs, and historians. Anthony Bourdain. He, to me, is the pinnacle of food writing. He's my man. And Anthony Bourdain's death hit me hard too, because Bourdain showed me the world through food. Anthony Bourdain's final show, Parts Unknown, took me to places all over the globe that I would not have seen otherwise, and connected me to people I would not know about otherwise. And most importantly, he connected me to my dad because there was an episode about Iran. I had to ask my dad if those foods were real and if they were part of his childhood, his upbringing. And sometimes I wonder if that's the closest I'm ever gonna get to my dad's homeland. The connection people have to their food, to their family recipes, it's so powerful. It can bring you to your knees. There's so many memoirs out there about loss and this desire to reconnect to your family. And think of a food memory. Think of the moment where someone puts a plate of food in front of you and you haven't tasted it in years, but that memory it brings you flooding back, maybe to that kitchen table where you had a family meal too. That's why I think food and folklore are so intertwined together. Whether you're watching Chef's Table or High on the Hog, both I highly recommend, reading a chef's memoir, we all seem to gravitate to whatever we were eating at that dining room table. We all kind of long for that sense of community. There might be a chef resurrecting cuisine lost through the transatlantic slave trade. You might have heard of the term heritage grains, or maybe you'll remember the iconic moment where President Obama sat down with Anthony Bourdain in plastic chairs in Vietnam and learned the proper way to slurp noodles. All of these can be about folklore and food. But folklore to me isn't just preserving a family recipe, it's also about the creative world that comes when you riff on them, when you continue the legacy. Bringing a recipe from the past into modern times, some chefs take pride in rebuilding that modern cuisine, or taking a recipe that they grew up around the kitchen table and they build a whole restaurant around it. I think food and folklore is some of the most interesting things we can read and learn from each other, and the stories that come out of it are so emotional and powerful, and honestly always have me a little bit hungry. I mean, have you ever tried to tweak a family recipe? Has there been a great debate? Some people won't touch them. They're perfect the way they are. And then there maybe might be families like mine who debate over who makes the best Thanksgiving stuffing. Personally, I think it's mine. So while I want to connect to my father's food and his folklore and keep his memory alive, I want to connect with other people too, other communities with their food. And that was part of the reason I created my small business and my Read It and Eat subscription box. The Read It and Eat box is themed around food writing and food stories. And it always includes a book, snacks from small businesses, and a donation to fight hunger here in Western New York. I want to know who makes my food, where it comes from, and why it matters. And reconnecting to our food is so important in a time where I feel so untethered. The next time you go home and gather around your family table, maybe ask for that family recipe. You'll never know how much time you have left with people. Or create the next family tradition. Keep the folklore of your own family alive around your next meal. And even better, invite someone new over for dinner and let them experience that part of you and that part of folklore through your food.